Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Brajadara Yashodanandana Brajadara Yamuna Tira Vanacha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janava Giridharaja Jaya Gopi Janava Giridharaja Yashodanandana Brajadara Yashodanandana Brajadara Yamuna Tira Vachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Kunja Vihari Janavana Giridharaja Jaya Gopi Janavana Giridharaja Yashodanandana Raja Janaran Yashodanandana Raja Janaran Yamuna Tira Vana Jaya Radha Kunja Vihari Jaya Vihara. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada ki Jaya Vishnupada Paramam Sapala Aparadikacharya Shtata Shata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jaya Jaya Vishnupada Paramam Sapala Aparadikacharya Shtata Shata Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki Jaya Haridas Thakur ki Jaya Panchatattva ki Jaya Gaur Pamanandi Hari Hari Bol. Good morning, devotees. Hare Krishna. We are reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 14, Text 39. Yad idam yoganushasanam navad etad avarundhate yan yasta danda munaya upashama shiva uparatatmanaha sama va gachanti. Is there anybody in the class who would like to recite? We'll do the word for word. Yat, which, idam, this ultimate abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, yoga anushasanam, only to be achieved by practicing devotional service, na, not, va, either, etat, this path of liberation, avarundhate, obtain, yat, therefore, nyasta dandaha, persons who have given up envying others, munayaha, saintly persons, upasham shilaha, who are now situated in a most peaceful existence, uparatta atmanaha, who have control over the mind and senses, samava gachanti, very easily obtained. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Saintly persons who are friends to all living entities have a peaceful consciousness. They have controlled their senses and minds, and they easily attain the path of liberation, the path back to Godhead. Being unfortunate, and attached to the miserable material conditions, a materialistic person cannot associate with them. Purport. The great Saint John Bart described both the miserable condition and the means to get out. The only way out of it is association with devotees, and this association is very easy. Although unfortunate people also get this opportunity, due to their great misfortune, they cannot take shelter of pure devotees, and consequently, they continuously suffer. Nonetheless, this Krishna consciousness movement insists that everyone take to this path by adopting the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. The preachers of Krishna consciousness go from door to door to inform people how they can be relieved from the miserable conditions of material life. As stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Guru Krishna Prasad Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. By the mercy of Krishna and Guru, one can get the seed of devotional service. If one is a little intelligent, he can cultivate Krishna consciousness and be freed from the miserable conditions of material life. Translation again. Saintly persons who are friends to all living entities have a peaceful consciousness. They have controlled their senses and minds, and they easily attain the path of liberation, the path back to Godhead. Being unfortunate and attached to the miserable material conditions, a materialistic person cannot associate with them. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shavakaya Chakshurunmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today's verse is nice. As usual, jam-packed with information, also very uplifting for those who see it in a positive light. This chapter is the forest of enjoyment, the allegorical explanation of being a jiva within the material energy, imprisoned along with all the other jivas who are defiant of God. And I was thinking about preaching. This verse is very insightful when it comes to preaching, but it explains a lot, depending on how deep we dig, that we can try our best to preach and give Krishna consciousness to others, but we're going to meet a great variety of different living entities, different jivas who are at different levels, and some will take more easily than others. And for us not to get bogged down in those complications, it requires some finesse. It says here that saintly persons are peaceful. Their consciousness is pure. Their mind and body, like their mind and senses, are controlled. And so it's actually quite easy for a person to inquire from such a saintly devotee about yoga, about bhakti yoga specifically. And Prabhupada explains this in the purport. It's actually quite easy for someone to inquire about God. And I'm sure there's numerous saintly devotees listening right now, and many of them probably have this experience where somebody could come up to them and inquire about God, and that devotee could very easily open their heart and explain so much information and share so much love and so much bhakti with someone who is receptive. However, that's the trick. How receptive are they? A devotee could very easily give so much to another person, but the receptivity of the other person will vary greatly. Um, and a lot of this has to do with envy, which is the main topic I'll get to. Um, yeah, it depends on the receptivity of the jiva, and the devotee whom can give this bhakti to another person, they have that bhakti because of their own receptivity. They have progressively accumulated more receptivity to Krishna and Krishna's mercy. And thus their cup is overflowing. They're able to give it to others. I was just reflecting on how Prabhupada says in his purport, the devotees go door to door to inform people how they can be relieved from the miserable conditions of life. I was just reflecting how during the initial, it might not even have been initial, it was in the first year of the COVID scare in Philadelphia in the Tikshiva Karunika ashram in West Philadelphia. We would go door to door to distribute books because prior to that, it was quite easy to distribute books in a city as large and densely populated as Philadelphia. But of course, when COVID happened, that made things extremely complicated. And so we would go door to door to try to inform people about the glories of love of God and the variation of what we, the reception that we got was substantial. Some people wouldn't open the door, some would look at you and not open the door, some would open the door and yell at you, some would open the door and say hello and say no thank you, some would open the door and say hello and say, tell me a little more. Like it was intense variation. And so this receptivity, as I said, has a lot to do with envy. And Prabhupada says in his purport, if one is a little intelligent, he can cultivate Krishna consciousness and be free from the miserable conditions of life, especially with the mercy of Mahaprabhu in this day and age. Relatively speaking, it's not that hard, but this envy in our hearts is so contaminating, it's so thick that it prevents us from connecting heart to heart with another jiva, what to speak of another jiva who is overflowing with bhakti. And the word for word translation, we see that these saintly persons have a peaceful existence and they have control over their mind and senses. But before the peaceful existence, before the control of the mind and senses, it says Nyasta Dandaha, persons who have given up envying others. And so this is quite important for us to advance in Krishna consciousness, to diminish this envy of others. And so let's unpack this a little bit. The envy of others is variegated, just like existence itself. And, we're taught serving others, glorifying others diminishes our envy. And it most certainly does that. However, there are more things that we can do to diminish this envy. And self-reflection is extremely helpful with this as we go deeper into subtle levels of more and more increasingly subtle levels of purification. It is self-reflection, reflecting upon ourselves, our words, our actions, our thoughts, our interactions with others, our prayer towards Krishna, our devotional service. When we become reflective in this way, we can see deeper and deeper that this envy is extensively pervading. And this envy, I've been meditating on this. This is envy of the self, two S's. There's the capital S, self, and then there's the little s, self. And if we really, there's envy of the self as a whole. Envy in general applies to self. However, it's the self, so we can split this. The capital S, self, refers to Krishna and his expansions as Paramatma and his union with every other living entity, whether the living entity is aware of it or not. And the little s, self, is the individual jivas. And so the capital S, self, refers to Krishna and his expansion as paramount with every other living entity. And I know for myself, when the topic of envy would be brought up, I would think to myself, I don't think I'm envious of Krishna. Or maybe if I am, I don't think it's I don't think it's that extensive or that intense. But the deeper I go, the more subtle levels I can see that no, there is. And a practical explanation and a practical observance of this envy is envy of other jivas, because envy of other jivas is actually envy of Krishna, because a jiva could express anything, beauty, knowledge, renunciation, whatever opulence you can pick. And where did that opulence come from? That opulence came from Krishna. So if we feel and express any envy towards literally anyone, you're actually expressing envy towards Krishna. It's indirect, but it's there nonetheless. And then if you dig deeper and consider it, then maybe we can see that there is envy of Krishna as God, because I want what God has. Sixth canto. I want to read something from the sixth canto. I've been reading about the pastime of Vritrasura, very fascinating pastime. And Indra's interesting, a very interesting relationship with Vritrasura and Indra's fascinating psychology. So Vritrasura takes birth out of the Yajna fire, and he's giving trouble to everyone because that's his service. He's actually a devotee and he's preparing to go back to Godhead. And the demigods are quite disturbed by Vritrasura's dealings. And they go to Vishnu. They go to their Lord and they beg for help. And there's a series of prayers, very nice prayers towards Krishna as they understand him, for protection and help because they see no other way, which is a nice characteristic of a devotee. They depend on Krishna. And so this verse is Canto 6, Chapter 9, verse 38. With deliberation, one will see that the Supreme Soul, although manifested in different ways, is actually the basic principle of everything. The total material energy is the cause of the material manifestation, but the material energy is caused by him. Therefore, he is the cause of all causes, the manifester of intelligence and the senses. He is perceived as the supersoul of everything. Without him, everything would be dead. You, as that supersoul, the supreme controller, are the only one remaining. This last line I've been meditating on. It's very wonderful. You, as that supersoul, the supreme controller, are the only one remaining. As I said, I've been meditating on this, and I wrote something down in conjunction with this last line of the verse, uh, just within my personal reflections, and so I'll share it with you. We have hurt many people. Many people hurt us. When we stop looking for perfection outside of us, you, as that super soul, are the only one remaining. So, in other words, every jiva is looking for God. Every jiva is actually craving that relationship with Krishna, whether they know it or not. The ones that don't know it look for that purnam, that completion, that perfection outside of themselves. They try to find it in other jivas, and this creates havoc, um, creates very complicated psychology and pathology. We treat each other terribly because we expect, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, the unconscious exhibition of this is called shadow projection, according to Jungian psychology. We expect the other person to act as God, to present actions, behaviors, words, thoughts, sentiments as God would. And that just brings us pain because they're not God. They're Jesus, just like us. And so when we stop looking for this perfection in other persons and we look inside, when we give up that the search for perfection outside of us and we look inside, the only one remaining is Krishna because he's actually there as the super soul. He joins all of us. He's along with all of us for the ride. And when we turn to him, then we find that perfection. Then we find what we actually need. And according to our sincerity, our effort, the mercy of the Guru, Krishna reciprocates. And then we no longer have to look for that perfection outside of us. We can understand that Krishna is actually acting through everyone and everything. And we don't have to hurt ourselves and we don't have to hurt others in this futile attempt of finding perfection of others. And so when we look inside, we see this envy of other jivas, and ultimately, which is actually envy of Krishna. And this can encourage us to become increasingly humble, to serve others, to serve Krishna, to love others, to love Krishna. Okay, moving on to a different part of the self, which is the little s, the jiva. So there's another verse that I wanted to read, but I'm also kind of short on time. But there's a really, so I've been thinking a lot about the transient false ego, and there's a really wonderful verse in the 10th canto, 10, 20, 19, about the ego, how it's like a cloud that covers the moon. The moon is the jiva, the actual spiritual spark. And all wondrous power and love radiates out of this jiva because it's a part and parcel of Krishna. However, that moon, that shining, glowing moon, is covered by clouds. And these clouds are the ego. And the clouds themselves can look like they're illuminated. They can look shiny, they can look bright. But it's not actually the full brightness of the jiva proper. And these clouds are the ego, the false transient ego. And so if we do some inner work, do some service to transmutate this ego, then this envy that I'm talking about will diminish. And we can come closer to Krishna, we can come closer to other jivas, and we can serve better. And this ego is I would like to give a separate class on the ego. It's quite fascinating that it's very subtle and it's very complicated nowadays. I think maybe in other yugas it might have been different, but in Kali Yuga, our ego is actually broken into pieces. It's multifaceted. It's not just one single thing, and uh, and so we have parts of ourselves that we may or may not be aware of. A practical example of this is that sometimes we may do or say something that seems out of character, and we reflect on it later and think, why did I say that? Or why did I do that? I really didn't intend to do or say what I did, and now I regret it. And the explanation is that there's parts of your ego that you may or may not be, well, I guess in this scenario, you're not aware of. And to become aware of these parts of our ego helps to transmutate them into gold, into something helpful and valuable in terms of serving Krishna. Um, and so thinking about this little s self, I pose a question to myself and you. What if you don't act out envy towards other devotees? What if we think, I don't think I'm very envious of other devotees. I treat them with respect and love to the best of my ability. I never lash out at them or anything, and that's good. But a level deeper than that is that what if we don't act out this envy towards other devotees, but us or the parts of ourselves act enviously towards ourselves? Ourselves being a devotee, ourselves are jivas who are trying to serve Krishna. And so, what if there are parts of our ego, as I just gave in this example of saying or doing something that we didn't really intend to doing, but it was kind of self-sabotaging? What if that is actually acting enviously towards a devotee because the parts of our ego that misbehave are actually exhibiting envy towards a devotee, the devotee being ourselves. And so that is envy. It's quite subtle, but it can be diminished, it can be transmutated. And so this brings me to my last point. There's a really wonderful verse in the ninth canto in the pastime of Durvasa Muni and Ambarish Maharaj. So in this verse, Prabhupada speaks of the envy of the self. Now, this is the only place in Bhagavatam that I'm aware of where Prabhupada directly addresses envy of the self. There may be others, but I'm not aware of them. If anyone else is aware of them, please share them with me so I can take note of them. Okay, so Ambarish Maharaj, wonderful, pure, mature devotee, acting as a king, acting out the archetype of a king for the pleasure of Krishna. Durvasa Muni, very powerful sage, very learned, very powerful, but perhaps a little envious. He comes along with his thousands of followers, right? That could make somebody puffed up, right? Ambarish Maharaj also had many followers. I mean, he was a king, so of course he had many followers too. But he understood that his playing the role of a king was Krishna's mercy, and it was his service. It was his devotional service towards Krishna. And so, by Krishna's mercy, he wasn't attached to this. And so, imagine being a king, but being that non-envious, it's quite impressive. Durvasa Muni, not yet at that level of purity. He had some purity for sure. You don't attain such intense mystic powers and knowledge without some level of purity. However, Ambarish Maharaj, higher level of purity and bhakti, which Durvasa Muni had not yet cultivated. Okay, where am I going with this? Let's see. Canto 9, Chapter 4, verse 44. I'll read that one first. So, Ambarish Maharaj was performing an Ekadashi Vrat. Him and his queen were about to break um, the fast according to the directions of the Brahmanas, which is valid. And but then Durvasa Muni showed up uninvited at a very inopportune time. Ambarish Maharaj did not complain. He did his thing. He acted very pleasantly, lovingly towards Durvasa Muni, and yet Durvasa Muni, by dint of his mystic powers, understood that Ambarish Maharaj had drank some water before serving Durvasa Muni some prasadam. What a horrible crime. And so Durvasa Muni chastises or attempts to chastise, according to his understanding, Ambarish Maharaj. So this is 9.444. Durvasa Muni says, "Alas, just see the behavior of this cruel man. He is not a devotee of Lord Vishnu. Being proud of his material opulence and his position, he considers himself God. Just see how he transgressed the laws of religion." This is interesting. It's pretty much a case of the pot calling the kettle black. It seems here that Durvasa Muni is quite envious of Ambarish Maharaj's position. He's calling Ambarish Maharaj proud, but the irony is that this is how pride and envy work, that we call the other person prideful and envious, but it's actually us who are exhibiting such things. And he acts out of anger and rage towards Ambarish Maharaj, and he tries to murder him. He tries to murder the king. He pulls out a tuft of his hair, which I guess was saturated with some of his power, and he threw it on the ground and summoned a fire demon to annihilate Ambarish. Ambarish Maharaj, being a pure devotee, satisfied within himself, peaceful, non-envious of others, he observed this and was like, this is pretty interesting. I didn't expect this to happen, but I am a surrendered servant of Krishna, and apparently this is part of Krishna's desire, and I will see how I can serve him and see what happens. And so he patiently observed, and Sudarshan Chakra, Krishna's personal weapon, personally came, manifested at the scene, and annihilated the fire demon that Durvasa Muni had created. And then Sudarshan Chakra harassed and chased Durvasa Muni all around the universe. Durvasa Muni had mystic powers, so he ran here, there, everywhere to escape the power of Sudarshan Chakra. So we can see that this envy of the self, envy of others, brings us great pain, actually. And Durvasa Muni, in this pastime, it shows an extreme example of the pain that comes from envy of others. And so he goes everywhere to try to hide from Sudarshan Chakra in the caves of Sumeru Mountain and the oceans, everywhere. Can't escape the power of Krishna. And so he goes to Lord Brahma and asks for help. Lord Brahma says, "I'm a devotee of Krishna. I can't help you. I can't check the power of the Lord Sudarshan Chakra." He goes to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva says the same thing. He says, I can't help you. This is above my pay grade. And he goes to Vishnu. My understanding is that he went to Shweta and saw Vishnu there, and he pleaded with him, "Please help me." Lord Vishnu says, "I am a puppet in the hands of my pure devotees. They love me so much, and I love them, that I just do what they want me to do. And so if you are that concerned about self-preservation, you need to go back to Ambarish and plead with him to forgive you. Okay, so this is Canto 9, Chapter 4, verse 69. This is the verse about the self-envy. Lord Vishnu says, O Brahmana, let me now advise you for your own protection. Please hear from me. By offending Maharaj Ambarish, you have acted with self-envy. Therefore, you should go to him immediately, without a moment's delay. One's so-called prowess, when employed against the devotee, certainly harms he who employs it. Thus, it is the subject, not the object, who is harmed. So, Vishnu is saying that you have envy of Ambarish Maharaj, and indirectly you have envy of myself. And this only brings pain. When one acts against devotee, acts against Krishna, it's actually the subject who is harmed, not the object of envy. And let's read the purport. A Vaishnava is always an object of envy for non-devotees, even when the non-devotee happens to be his father. To give a practical example, Haricakra was envious of Prahlad Maharaj, but this envy of the devotee was harmful to Haricakra, not to Prahlad. Every action taken by Haricakra against his son Prahlad Maharaj was taken very seriously by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus, when Haricakra was on the verge of killing Prahlad, the Lord personally appeared and killed Haricakra. Service to a Vaishnava gradually accumulates and becomes an asset for the devotee. Similarly, harmful activities directed against the devotee gradually become the ultimate cause of the performer's fall down. Even such a great Brahmana and mystic yogi as Durvasa was in a most dangerous situation because of his offense at the lotus feet of Maharaj Ambarish, pure devotee. And so we see that this envy of others, this indirect envy of Krishna, only brings harm to ourselves and actually puts a barrier between us and Krishna. So in the word for word translation is very interesting. There's the word Atma Abhicharaha. Atma Abhicharaha. And Prabhupada translates this as self-envy or envious of yourself. And in parentheses it says, your mind has become your enemy. Envious of yourself, or in other words, your mind has become your enemy. So this is really interesting to analyze and meditate on. Ambarish Maharaj acted envious towards himself. However, you could say that part of his unindividuated and impure self was his mind. His mind got the better of him. And we can extend this to the ego too, I think, because I've heard my Guru Maharaj explain numerous times that the mind and the ego are twins. And so what are twins? I had friends in college who were twins. They look similar, they speak similar, they act similar, their names are similar. However, they're still two separate entities. They're different entities, but they're very, very much alike to each other. And so I may be so bold to extend this, that this also applies to the ego. Your ego has become your enemy. And this goes back to what I was speaking earlier, these parts of the ego that we're not aware of, these parts of the ego that we don't proactively do something to transmutate them into servants of Krishna. They can act as our enemy, just as the extreme example of Maharaj Ambarish. He had envy of Ambarish and indirect envy of Krishna, and the parts of himself that are unindividuated, the parts of himself that are not being used in service to Krishna, got the better of him. And summoned Sudarshan Chakra. I mean, wow, what an incredible thing to experience. I don't wish to, but it's quite amazing to have the Lord's personal weapon as Sudarshan Chakra come to destroy you. That's quite amazing. Um, what time do we have? What else? I think that's all I'd like to share here that I had prepared. If anybody has questions, comments, or corrections, please share. I believe we have 12 minutes remaining for any type of discussion. If anybody would like to share, I know a lot of devotees are busy at this time, which is understandable. You're welcome, Yashadev. Thank you for your thanks. Oh, I hear somebody.
Hare Krishna.
Very well, Tarka Guru. My obeisances.
Dasa Prem has got his mic on.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
want to thank you for a very nice class, provoked lots of thought for me. And I'm gonna send you some references from Srimad Bhagavatam and elsewhere. There are several other instances of references to self-envy
thank you.
that you might find of interest. Um, when I read this verse, I was um, thinking about Srila Prabhupada references Madhya Lila of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, 19th chapter, text 151. It's talking about how one receives the mercy of Krishna and the spiritual master, that the creeper of devotional service, the seed of the creeper of devotional service, the Bhakti Lata Bij. This is I know for in the early days of my Krishna consciousness, I was not clear on the precise mechanism by which one receives the Bhakti Lata Bij. And I think it was in part due to the wording of this verse. According to their karma, all living entities are wandering throughout the entire universe. Some of them are being elevated to the upper planetary systems, and some are going down into the lower planetary systems. Out of many millions of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna, by the mercy of both Krishna and the spiritual master. Such a person receives the seed of the creeper devotional service. So my confusion was about the nature of that seed. And what I have come to understand now is that and because Srila Prabhupada in his purport references from the Madhya Lila, 22nd chapter, text 107, Nityasira Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunai Shravana Nadi Shuddha Chite Karaya Uday, that dormant devotional service to Krishna is within everyone simply by one's associating with devotees, hearing their good instructions, and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Dormant love for Krishna is awakened. In this way, one acquires the seed of devotional service, Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. So, my problem was that at the time that I don't know, I guess I'm just inattentive somehow in the course of reading. It just didn't sink in. But and I think it's worth discussing. Perhaps others have the same confusion that when we speak of receiving the Bhakti Lata Bij, what my confusion was that I did not understand that devotional service is already existing in the hearts of all living entities. It's already there in a dormant state. And when we speak of receiving the Bhakti Lata Bij, it's not that we are receiving that dormant Krishna consciousness. It's that by that mercy of a devotee or Krishna, that dormant Krishna consciousness is awakened. So the receiving of the Bhakti Lata Bij is the awakening of the dormant Krishna consciousness that is already there. So it's a kind of a subtle point, but anyway, that's something that I was thinking about when I read this verse in purport. I'm just reminded of that point, which I thought perhaps others might have some confusion about that, and so I thought to mention. I appreciate your angle on the issue of envy, which did not occur to me when I read this, but you make a good point, and interesting to consider the issue of self-envy, which, as I say, is mentioned in a few places, and I'll share those with you. I will shut up and let Dasa Prema speak. Thank you again, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for sharing. I sincerely appreciate it. Dasa, did you have anything?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Nice to hear from you this morning.
Hare Krishna.
So I'm wondering, what's your realization on the balance between kind of like this, self-worth, introspection, self-development, maybe using modern psychological techniques versus just letting the process itself kind of like sort us out. And because taken into consideration we only have so much time for like for activities that aren't related to like we have to work, maintain our body, so we only have so much time to allocate for these other things. So what's your realization on the balance? And I'll just say one thing, because interestingly, I heard one devotee in this regard say that we're so messed up in Kali Yuga that it's almost be more beneficial to just like stop pushing on so many projects and this and that, and just like have a big massive grieving circle where we realize how messed up we are and then go from there. Anyways, the main part is that first inquiry.
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting. Also, little addition.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Yeah, it's a practical point. We only have so much time. We only have so much energy. Whether you're in the temple or outside the temple, it's a practical question as to where to put that energy. Um, I think for me personally, it's relatively easy for me to do that, to look inwardly and do that inner work. My astrological chart and the body and mind that I've been given in this lifetime, in accordance with my Haricakra from my past lifetime, I'm very much a philosopher by nature, so it's quite easy for me to introspect and reflect. But that doesn't mean other people can't do it. And a very important question is to think, what is the practicality of how much time and energy should be put into it? And as I just said, I think it's relatively easy for me. Of course, I have to put out effort. It doesn't just happen. But in accordance with that, bhakti is a mystical process. You can even see other forms of religion. You have mysticism in Christianity. And when I say mysticism, I mean like the unfolding of an inner world in connection with God, what happens inside our own minds, inside our own consciousness, inside our own bodies in relation to God. An extremely personal thing that can't be experienced by anybody else except for God and the Jiva. You see it in Christianity with Saint John of the Cross, Saint Teresa of Avila. You see it in Judaism, in Kabbalah. You see it in Islam and Sufism. It's there, but it's mystic, it's secret. And the same thing applies to bhakti. Just think of Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Srila Prabhupada. They had very intense, intimate experiences with Krishna internally that nobody else can perceive. And the only reason we have any evidence of it is because they have the mercy to write them down and to speak about them with us. And so in my opinion, it's quite a natural process in any religion, but especially in Krishna consciousness. We're endowed with a great wealth of potential inner experience here. And so, yeah, it's a serious concern, the practicality of how much time and energy to spend in it. However, I think it's also quite natural for a bhakta to endeavor inwardly. And because it's natural in that way, and in my opinion, quite sattvic in that way, it doesn't have to be so hard. It doesn't have to take so much time. Krishna can do anything. If that sincere desire is there and that effort is there, Krishna can, well, to give a specific example, Lord Chaitanya can make a lame man climb a mountain, and he can give a blind man sight. He can give a dumb man the power of oration to give a wonderful speech. So I hope that answers something. Thank you for asking. I see comments in the chat. Hare Krishna. Leela Kishori asked about the difference between jealousy and enviousness. That's a good point. I haven't thought about that. It's something for me to think about. It would help to look in the dictionary. I think I ask Siri all the time definitions of words. So what is the definition of jealousy and what is the definition of enviousness according to the English dictionary, and then of course to think about it and meditate it within the context of Krishna consciousness. Off the top of my head, it sounds like they're identical. Perhaps jealousy is just a more superficial version. Maybe more of a sentimental version versus enviousness being something deeper, more subtle. Off the top of my head, that's what comes to mind, but I think I'd have to do some more research to give you a deeper answer. Thank you for that.
Hare Krishna. Good morning.
Oh, hey, whoa.
I was asking because when you were speaking about the story with Ambrish Maharaj, that a lot of times when I'm reading in Srimad Bhagavatam, it seems that the problem comes from people being jealous or like more protective of their position. Jealousy being like, I'm concerned or fearful that I'm going to lose something I have or something that I own, as opposed to envious when I want something you have and I don't want you to have it anymore. I don't just want something like you have. I want exactly what you have, and I want you to kind of fall down from it. And a lot of times I when you were talking about envy of the self, I'm like, for me personally, it isn't so much, it's more like being jealous, like wanting to hang on to something I think is mine and fear that I'm going to lose some position or some, some appreciation or some accolades or some followers, like you said in the story that that you were talking about. So it's just interesting to me because a lot of times when I see envy over and over again in purports and things, I think, this seems more like someone being jealous than someone being envious, more concerned about themselves and wanting like the prowess and the prestige than really wanting to take something from someone else. So I just wanted to bring that up because when you were talking about envy of the self, I thought, for me, it's more like being like being fearful and wanting to hang on to things I think are about me and not seeing that they're really all about Krishna.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. But to look at it another angle, I think they're very interrelated and even interchangeable. It's just a matter of perspective, I think. Because you said jealous that I have something and I want to hold on to it and I don't want you to take it away from me. Yeah, I think that's definitely valid jealousy. To look at it in another perspective, the same situation, I think you could say it's actually envious of Krishna and even self-envy, because to lose something is material, because in spiritual understanding, everything is eternal, sat chit ananda. And so to be envious of, you could look at it as envy of being able to hold on to something. God has everything and he can hold on to it. Nobody can take it away from him. Even the jiva itself is actually eternal. Whatever qualities that are inherent to the jiva can't be taken away. And so, yeah, I think you could look at them interchangeably. It's just a matter of perspective. Hopefully that's something that is helpful. But thank you for bringing that up. I should look up this word jealousy and all. Something for me to meditate on. Thank you. Parameshwari asks, can I please share my motivation for inner work? I remember you shared a realization of impediment in bhakti. Yeah, I've posed this question to myself in case I ever well, I pose this question to myself because it's a part of myself that questions me, but also it's the anticipation in the future if anybody chooses to criticize putting so much focus on inner work. My motivation behind inner work, and particularly in psychology, is Krishna consciousness. I want nothing more than to be a pure, mature devotee. I want to be able to chant purely. That's the innermost, top number one desire in my heart. And I, somewhere along the lines, I think mostly beginning when I was in Atlanta, I realized that my broken psychology, my pathology, subtle internal pathology was blocking me from Krishna. I'll give you a small example of how it started. In Atlanta, I realized that I'm constantly inwardly, not outwardly. I never outwardly said anything to a devotee to offend them, but inwardly, constantly judging other devotees, constantly. And I noticed it. This is an aparad. This is preventing me from getting what I want, which is a deeper, loving relationship with Krishna. And so I thought to myself, where is this coming from? And upon reflection and talking with other devotees, particularly who have some knowledge in psychology, I realized that I am judgmental of other people because I am judgmental of myself. And so I thought to myself, why am I judgmental of myself? And this led down a whole trail of unfolding of inner pathology um, in regards to my inner psyche. And so that's my motivation. My motivation is to become more Krishna conscious. And I realize that these things internally that are inherent to many Kali Yuga residents is preventing me from becoming more Krishna conscious. Thank you, Targa, for sending this other example of self-envy. I'm going to screenshot this so I can put it in my notes later. Okay, it's 8:10. If anybody else has anything quick to add, otherwise we can end here. Oh, thank you, Yashadev. Very well. Thank you, Tarka, Dasya, Parameshri, Sachi. Thank you. A lot of people commented questions in the chat box and with their voice. Thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate it. It's enlivening and encouraging. Hare Krishna. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Hari Bol Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.